Hello there, this is Jennie from Designs with Paper. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel, and welcome to the first episode of Crime and Coloring, the Hawes Murders. I will be telling the sad story of Richard Hawes, his wife Emma Pettis Hawes, and their children. This is a true crime murder story, and it does involve child death. If that is not your thing, if that is too hard for you, please check out any of my other videos. To begin with, I have half of a sheet of Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock, and I've placed that in my Misty stamp positioner. I have also selected 2 Mama Elephant stamp sets, In My Heart and Tiny Heroes. I do not believe that either of these stamp sets are still available, but I chose them because they are small and quick and easy to color, even for a beginning colorist. You don't need to go fancy at all. In fact, they're so tiny that it's hard to use more than just 2 colors on any of the images. I am placing all of the children from these stamp sets into my Misty stamp positioner. I am leaving a little bit of room because when I decide what I'm going to use these for, I will use the coordinating dies and cut them out with my die cut machine. Now that I have all the stamps in the Misty, I will go ahead and close that Misty lid and pick up all those stamps and resituate my paper because the stamps are sticky. I am going to ink them up with Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. I chose this ink because it is Copic marker friendly, and that is what I am coloring with tonight. I also will be leaving the images in my Misty, and when I have finished coloring, I will go and stamp over them again. And that's a good thing to do because there are a few lines that are not particularly perfect. Okay, so let's get into the story. This story takes place in Birmingham, Alabama in the 1880s. Richard Hawes was born in Atlanta, Georgia in about 1857. I did see one record that had him born in Alabama, but I think that is where he's buried, not where he was actually born. And Richard was an engineer for the Georgia Pacific Railroad. Emma Pettis was born in 1861 in Indiana and was the daughter of Colonel William Pettis. She was considered to be one of the beauties of Atlanta in the late 1870s, but her father did not approve of Richard, so her and Richard eloped at the home of a minister, and her father disowned her until he was on his deathbed. And then he forgave her, and he left her and her some property worth about $18,000. And by left her, I mean left to her and him because it was the 1800s and she couldn't own it without her husband, right? All right, the couple had 3 children. May, born about 1880, and she has a birthplace listed as Atlanta. Irene, born about 1882, and Willie, born about 1884, and I couldn't find birthplaces for either of those children. Sometime after May was born, they moved from Atlanta, Georgia to Birmingham, Alabama. On December 4th, 1888, the body of a young girl was found in East Lake by 2 local teenage boaters. The county coroner was called to the scene and conducted an initial examination there at the site and determined that the cause of death was murder. Because the child was not identified, her body was taken to a funeral parlor in town and left out for public viewing in hopes that somebody would be able to identify her. Teachers in the local schools even gave their students an early out that day so that they could go and look at this poor child and hopefully identify her. Despite being viewed by thousands of people, it wasn't until the end of the next day that a local butcher was able to identify the body of Mary Hawes, the daughter of Richard and Emma Hawes. So after May was found, there was a coroner's inquest. And in that inquest, it appeared that Richard and Emma had somewhat of a troubled marriage. From early on, Hawes had suspected his wife of infidelity, and one time before they even moved to Birmingham, he told her he was going to take a train run from Atlanta and West Point Railroad, but secretly returned to his house that night and chased a young man out of their bedroom. Both that young man and Richard were arrested for disorderly conduct. The other man skipped his bond, and so the matter never went to trial. Hawes said he initiated divorce proceedings, but the couple reconciled and then moved to Montgomery and then later to Birmingham. So this is kind of crazy because what the heck? All of a sudden you go from knowing nothing about these people and now one of their daughters is dead. Okay, so during the inquest, there was a disagreement between some of the people that knew Richard and Emma. Some claimed that Emma was his wife, and some claimed that he'd been granted a divorce. There was a woman named Fanny who worked in the house with the women and helped take care of the children. Emma was reported to have been an alcoholic and had a drinking problem, and very often May was left to take care of her younger sister, and younger brother, and with the help of this woman, Fanny. Fanny claimed that the weekend before May's body was found, she saw Richard and May put Emma on a train or help Emma pack for a trip to Atlanta to pick up Willie, her son, who had been staying with Richard's family in Atlanta. Okay, so not a lot of information. Nobody kind of really knew what was going on still. And Richard is gone. Nobody can even find him. So when the inquest adjourned for the night, a local newspaper received a telegram announcing that Richard Hawes had married May's Story in Mississippi. Okay, a whole nother state. It also listed their train itinerary going from Columbus, Mississippi to Atlanta, Georgia. So when the train stopped at the Birmingham train station, police boarded the train and arrested Richard Hawes for the murder of May. There was a reporter for the newspaper on the scene, and he was quoted to say that Richard claimed he didn't express any, he didn't ask any questions. He didn't say, what, no, what, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. He asked no questions. He didn't ask which of his children he was accused of being murdered, and he didn't ask to see the child, and he didn't say anything about the rest of his family. All that he said all the way to jail was that he was innocent. So Richard continued to claim his innocence even when he was being interviewed at the jail after his arrest. He claimed that having caught Emma in infidelity, he filed for divorce in 1886. And according to him, the divorce took 2 years to complete in Georgia, but took effect in October of 1888. So if they're not divorced, he's moved her from Georgia to Alabama. That's kind of weird, right? On Friday, December 7th, during a long day of questioning, May's, the second wife, told the police, she admitted to the police that Richard told her that he was divorced and only had one male child. While he was in jail, he wrote her a letter and told her that he was sorry that he never mentioned May because May was going to be in a convent and he didn't want to trouble her. He never mentioned Irene. Okay. So Richard's son, his name was Willie. He apparently stayed in Atlanta with Richard's brother, Jim. I found a record that names him as James also, which, surprised Jim as a nickname for James. The Birmingham police then decided they needed to words are hard. They needed to find Emma and Irene because nobody has seen them. So they go for a full-scale search. On December 8th, after the discovery of a bloody hatchet and a torn ribbon, they dragged the lake and found the body of Emma Hawes. She appeared to have been beaten and then weighed down with iron. Okay? Dude, this guy's on a rampage. Then they started looking even harder to find Irene. So Irene is the middle child, the youngest daughter. And Irene is suspected to have been about 6. So May was about 8, Irene was about 6, and Lily was about 4 when all of this went down. So after continuing to drag the lake where they found Emma and May, and they couldn't find Irene. So after 3 days, after dragging the lake, they decided to drain the lake. And on the 3rd day of draining, they found Irene about 30 feet from where her mother was. She was also weighed down. So Irene's body was immediately taken to the pavilion for a really quick examination, and then she was taken straight to the cemetery and immediately buried. In between finding Emma and Irene, there was a lot of hype in the newspapers. The newspapers were just really super reporting this story, and they had lots of details, very kind of lurid details, especially for the time. And they had lots and lots of speculations as to what had actually happened. Now, because of all of the information in the newspaper, people were starting to get really riled up, and they wanted to actually storm the jail and take Richard Hawes out and hang him. So after finding Irene and having quickly determined that she was in fact murdered and getting her to the cemetery and buried quickly, they were trying to avoid mob, like a riot, right? The sheriff had actually handed weapons, like issued weapons to deputies and prison guards and put them on the prison roof. That did not stop this mob of people. They were rioting. It was like, one report said 2,000 people. One report said nearly 3,000 people. And they wanted to take Richard out of jail, and they wanted to hang him. They did not care about a trial. Somewhere in the mob, there was a shot heard. And so the sheriff ordered return fire. And at the end of it all, 10 people were dead, including like a postmaster and some kind of prominent citizens. So here we have this murder of this woman and her children at the hand of her husband and their father. And the mob has gone crazy, and people have been shot. And the sheriff is now kind of in the hot seat because innocent bystanders, I shouldn't say innocent bystanders, but members of this mob had been shot to death during the riot. And the riot made national headlines, which was pretty impressive for the 1880s. And for days was in the New York Times. The sheriff and the police chief were both placed under arrest, and the governor sent 500 militia, kind of like reservists, to go guard the prison and to take back the state, kind of bring everything back into order. The sheriff and the police chief did go on trial the next year, but they were released after a deadlock jury. There was no consensus on whether or not they were actually responsible for the death of those men during the riot. So Richard's trial began on Monday, April 22nd, 1889. And even though he was charged with murdering all 3 victims, the state decided that the strongest case around Richard lay with the facts around Mary's murder. And I think that wasn't uncommon then, and it's still not necessarily uncommon now. Even when you know somebody has committed more than one crime, you charge them with the one that you have the most evidence for, right? So in this instance, all of the evidence was circumstantial, and it was all witness evidence. So it was they kind of went with what they thought they could really prove. Okay. So according to Fanny, that is the woman who worked in the house and helped May take care of her sister and brother when her mother was out drinking. And according to Fanny, May had been staying with her at a boarding house on the night of December 3rd, 1888. And then other eyewitnesses saw Richard and Mary getting onto a train on December 3rd around 7 or 8 at night and getting off at the East Lake stop together, both of them. And then Richard, or somebody who looked a lot like him, got back on the train and returned back home less than an hour later. So East Lake is the lake where they found Irene and Mary and Emma. So the next day after he was seen taking May down to this town where the lake was, Hawes left. He left that morning to go to Mississippi to marry another woman, to marry the Miss Story. Her name was Miss Story. And the prosecution maintained that his motive was that he needed to get rid of his wife and his daughter so that he could go and marry this new wife. So Richard's defense was based mostly on his own testimony. Nobody could be found to back up his alibi. And his defense attorney stated that the eyewitness account was faulty due to either memory lapse or deceit. Richard claimed to have indeed taken Mary to Eastlake, but on December 1st, not the 3rd. And he said he took her there to go shopping. And then when he and Mary got home the same night, December 3rd, about 8:30, he went back to the city again. And on the same night, sent his son Willie to Atlanta. So he took May shopping, came home, took Willie, and sent him to Atlanta. Okay, that's what he's saying. He said that he arrived home early in the morning on Sunday, December 2nd, and found the door to his house open and his wife and daughters gone. So that's kind of weird, right? He claimed that he thought his wife had taken his daughters to visit friends. Who goes anywhere early in the morning on Sunday except church? I'm just saying. He then got on the train and headed for Columbus, Mississippi, the following Tuesday after taking care of business arrangements, is what he said. All right. So there wasn't a lot of definitive proof to say, yeah, he had done this. Like, nobody saw him throw his wife or his daughters in the lake. Nobody saw him riding to the lake with them and riding home without them. Fanny did say she saw him take her there, but her story changed a couple of times as well. In fact, after Richard's trial, there was a trial to determine if she was guilty at all, and she was. I didn't find a lot about the trial, just that it didn't go anywhere. After the prosecution and the defense have presented their side, their evidence or lack thereof, the judge told the jury that there were 4 possible verdicts available. They could, first of all, go with first-degree manslaughter, and Richard would be in prison for no less than or no more than 10 years. The second option was second-degree murder, and it would confine Richard to jail for no less than 10 years, but maybe longer. The third option was first-degree murder, and it would sentence Richard to life imprisonment or the death penalty. And then their fourth option was not guilty. So the jury was entirely males at this point. Now, they were, the report I read said they were anywhere from 28 to 47. They deliberated for 45 minutes and decided upon the death penalty. And that verdict came back on May 3rd, 1889. So the trial started April 22nd, and the verdict came back May 3rd. So there were some appeals. His attorneys tried to get the judgment or the verdict set aside. They tried for other new trials. During Richard's last month in jail, he apparently admitted to his brother Jim and a guard that he had paid an associate named John Wiley to commit the murders. He told the guard that he wanted Wiley to kill only Emma and Irene, but when it appeared that May might know something about that, he decided to intoxicate May and drown her at Eastlake Park. So the guard comes forward, he tells everybody this confession, and Richard denies it. And there was no other evidence. So again, when Richard's trial was all said and done, there was a trial for both John Wiley and Fanny, but neither one of them were convicted of anything. So Richard Hawes was executed by the sheriff on February 28th, 1890. So he's got, less than a year that his appeals were going on. Here's the crazy thing. Tickets to his execution were being sold on the street for as much as $200. Like, the hanging was a public event, and people were paying as much as $200 to watch this man hang. That's craziness. That is craziness. Crazy. Okay, so after a prayer, the sheriff counted to 3 and pulled the lever and dropped the platform. And that was it. Richard Hawes was buried by his brother Jim in an unmarked grave in the family's plot, and no words were spoken over the grave. I did go to find a grave and found that he is buried in Birmingham, Alabama. Emma, Irene, and May Hawes are buried next to each other in a cemetery in Birmingham as well. Nobody knows for sure what happened to Willie, but it is pretty much generally thought that he stayed with Richard's brother Jim, and Jim took care of him there in Atlanta. So, crazy story. This was the oldest crime I could find good information and documentation for in the state of Alabama. And Alabama is first alphabetically in the United States, so that's why we started there. So I am just blown away that this man could marry a pretty girl, catch her. I mean, he did say he caught her cheating on him, and there was an arrest warrant sworn out for the guy she was supposedly having the affair with. But then he files for divorce. He moves her to a different state. It takes 2 years, supposedly, and nobody can find any records of this divorce. Prosecution, defense, nobody could find paperwork on this divorce. So he decides that instead of find the paperwork and move away from his wife, he's just going to kill her and his daughters so he can start over. That's insane. And it doesn't seem like he even, like in the information I found, he didn't seem like he even cared that his kids were dead. Like the reporter that saw him being arrested on the train was quoted to have said that he didn't even ask about his children. Didn't even ask. As a parent, I don't even understand that. I don't understand how you could kill your children, first of all. But I also don't understand how you couldn't even, in feigning innocence, ask about your other children. I don't know. Okay, just to follow up on the coloring, when I go outside of the lines with my Copic markers, I pull out a Jelly Roll pen and it covers it up. Lickety-split, you can't even tell, no time flat. Now that these have all been colored in and my boo-boos have been fixed, I am going to go ahead and stick this paper back into my Misty Stamp Positioner because you remember at the beginning, I said I was going to leave my stamps in so that I could restamp this because not all of the lines were crisp and clean. So I'm going to ink them up again with that Simon Says stamp, Intense Black ink. I am going to close the lid on my Misty and use my hand to run over the lid of my Misty, giving some nice firm pressure, and that should clear up any of the lines that I still have. So there you go. Thank you so much for stopping by for episode 1 of Crime and Coloring. Leave me a comment, leave me a thumbs up, let me know if you liked it and if you didn't. I have a couple other videos here for you to watch, as well as a subscribe button. If you have not done so already, I would love it if you subscribe to my channel. And as always, I hope you have a really fabulous